Are voucher programs constitutional? And if so, what parts and what parts aren't? Now, I really started to dig into this as far as the federal government goes in part one of this. And I'm going to do my best to attempt to give you some state examples in part two. Now, the law is a weird thing because it's a little bit fluid. Constitutions are supposed to kind of be locked into stone unless, there's a constitutional amendment, but laws ebb and flow. And sometimes we do things and we don't know whether or not they're legal or illegal until a court case is filed and a court then makes a decision, and then an appeals court makes a decision, and then the Supreme Court makes a decision either on the state or the federal level. And I dug into the differences between that a little bit in part one. So when I say attempt, I mean, look, this is thick stuff. All right. And remember, don't blame me. Don't shoot the messenger, because I didn't necessarily want to do this particular podcast, but it was asked, and I have learned a lot, and it's helped increase my education. So I hope it increases your education too. I'm going to cover some states and give you hopefully a little direction on where to go to look in your states. And if you want me to cover your state on a future podcast, you better get a lot of people to ask me to do it, because I have taken copious amounts of time trying to dig into how to frame, are vouchers constitutional under state constitutions now? Because remember, it's got to be both. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Florida first. I'm going to go Florida, South Carolina, Texas, a few other states today. I think that's a good sampling, so to speak, all right? So let's talk about Florida. Now, under Florida's constitution, education has to be uniform, efficient, safe, secure, and high quality. Sounds pretty good. And this is the system of free public schools. If you want to look at it, it's Article 9, Section 1, I think, but it's an Article 9 of the Florida Constitution. Okay. So in 2006, there was a case called Bush versus Holmes. Now, remember, you have a law, and then court cases kind of refine and not really refine. Well, they refine the law, but they interpret the law. They interpret what that statute should mean, what that Constitution means, because it doesn't explain it. It just says that education has to be uniform, efficient, safe, secure, and high quality. So now we have this court case called Bush versus Holmes. This was in 2006. And this was when the Opportunity Scholarship came out in Florida. And this was the Opportunity Scholarship in Bush versus Holmes was struck down because it said that vouchers that were paid for private school tuition with public school funds were bad, right? The court said it diverted money from and conflicted with the constitutional mandate to maintain a uniform public school system. So they had gone, you need a uniform public school system. So all the kids should have a uniform system, which is like a similar system, is the way I would interpret that, like a similar system. And it said that if you pay directly tuition, this is important, pay directly tuition to private school, it doesn't do that. So what's legal now, right? And what's the program design, what's going on in Florida now, right? Well, Florida's current choice is built around scholarships and this ESA, this educational savings accounts, and it's administered by a scholarship funding organization. Oh my goodness. I told you we were getting thick, but you wanted to know. You want to know this. Okay. But it allows the parents to direct the spending. Now, remember, we talked about some federal laws where if the parent got the choice, it didn't cause a violation. But if the state directed the choice, then we started to have problems, right? So if the people direct the choice, it's a problem. So this Opportunity Scholarship that was struck down was it paid tuition directly to a private school. Here, they created this middleman, if you will, this middle organization, this scholarship funding organization. It's called an SFO or whatever in Florida, where it holds the money and the parents direct the spending. Okay, now it was called the Family Empowerment Scholarship, if you want to look this up. It's House Bill 1 in 2023. And that's how they're trying to operate it. So they're trying to get around this Bush versus Home court case by saying, well, wait a minute, we're not paying the tuition directly, right? And so these programs are operating right now, continue to operate, and they're structured to avoid the direct tuition model, which was invalidated in Bush versus Home. So there's still a lot of risk in Florida, by the way, for the people that are proponents of vouchers or ESAs going through the SFO. Isn't that really complicated? They're still at risk because the opponents are going to argue that the large-scale diversion still breaches uniformity, right? And there's no new federal Supreme Court ruling talking about HB1. Now, HB1 was that family empowerment scholarship rule we're operating under now in Florida. So, I know. I'm sorry. I'm only 5 minutes in, and I'm already getting a little exhausted. Let me try again, please. Please don't hang up. Don't hang up, Mom. Stay with me just for a second, all right? Which is, if the government was giving money directly to schools, bad. But there is a theory, even under previous federal laws, that if the money goes to the parents and then the money goes to the schools, it's allowed. And that's what Florida's trying now. Will it hold up under the uniformity uniformity clause in the Florida Constitution? I don't know. I think there could be a good argument that it doesn't. Just because the parents get to pick, it still could be not uniform. Now, remember, the federal Constitution doesn't have anything about uniformity. There is no public access to education under federal law, so there is no uniformity clause. But Florida's got this uniformity clause, and it doesn't feel very uniform, does it, to me? And so I think that there's probably going to be a Florida Supreme Court case that's going to challenge how the current voucher program is doing in Florida, and whether or not it is not uniform. But don't forget this. Constitutions can be changed. And Florida could absolutely change this word from uniform to something else and still go back to voucher programs if the will of the public votes to do that way. So two things have got to happen. Right now, the vouchers are going. It's moving forward. And every day it goes forward, it's going to be harder for a court to uncork it and to undo it, right? But Florida has had this uniform thing in their constitution. So I don't know if it would hold up. But if it gets challenged and it holds up, if it doesn't hold up, they can go back and try to amend the Constitution. I don't know what the rules are for amending the Constitution in the state of Florida, but every single Constitution can be changed by the people, right? It's a legal formatting, even the United States Constitution. So there's just going to be rules to do that. So you still got to look at all that. I think that's going to be a big fight that's going to go on for years. All right, let's turn to another state, South Carolina. And South Carolina has a clause that bars public funds to be used for the direct benefit of private schools. And they have a duty to support public schools. A little bit different, not uniform, but there's actually a barring. Now, in 2024, so this is pretty recent, there was an Edison versus South Carolina Department of Education, EIDSON, right? So it's a South Carolina constitutional issue. And it held that the 2023 law was unconstitutional insofar as it paid private school tuition, which was a direct benefit to private schools. Now, after the ruling, the agency revived the policy to bar tuition used under this program. Oh my God, what does all that mean? This is why I probably wasn't a good lawyer. These words get really thick. So what does that mean? What's legal now in South Carolina? Direct tuition payments to private schools using state dollars are on very shaky grounds in South Carolina. Non-tuitional educational support, certain services and materials may be okay. But any new programs must really avoid this direct institutional aid. Now, Florida is trying to get away from that direct institutional aid by having a middle person, this scholarship funding organization, which is kind of a middle program. I think the courts will see through that. I mean, it's still the same thing just because you put a middle person between the people and the school and how they get the money. I mean, it's just a pass-through entity, right? I don't know. I think this is going to be it's going to be an interesting fight. So once again, no direct money to schools, but states are doing workarounds. So watch those workarounds, right? I wish I could be more concrete for you, but it's going to take a while for state associations and other people to sue, have these cases go up to the Supreme Court and clarify all this for us. But we're going to have to pay attention to this over the next couple of years, right? Okay. Okay. Ohio. I'm going to do Ohio, Arizona. I'm not going to tell you what other states because maybe your state's on here and I want you to listen a little longer. All right. So Ohio has a clause in its constitution. It's not the word uniform, but it's thorough and efficient systems of common schools. Common sounds uniform though, doesn't it? Common, uniform, common. Maybe not. Maybe that could be similar. So maybe it is the same as uniform, right? I haven't read a court case about that, but Ohio's constitution does say thorough and efficient. So I want you to look in your state constitution, and does it use words like thorough and efficient, uniform, common? things to be on the lookout. And it does limit funding based on religious attributes. Okay, so now in 2025, this is a June of 26 case, June 26 of like this year, 2025. Franklin County Trial Court ruled that expanded ed choice vouchers were unconstitutional under the thorough and efficient clause in the Ohio Constitution. And the judge allowed the program to continue pending appeal. So a federal trial court. So look, here's how it works in most states. It's a little different, but by and large, it's trial court. Now, it might not be called, it might be called a general sessions court, whatever. But a trial court, then you have an appellate court, then you have the Supreme Court. So typically there are 3 levels to this. And this judge said, look, I find the ed choice voucher program unconstitutional in Ohio. And this was as of a couple months ago. It's unconstitutional. But the trial judge is not the last say. It'll go to the appellate court and then the state Supreme Court, and they will have the last word. So once again, we do not know. So what's legal now? Okay. In effect, it's legal, but it's under appeal. And so it may get dumped pretty soon. So the core vulnerability is that large-scale diversions, like large-scale voucher programs that just take a ton of money away from public schools, may undercut the thorough and efficient public school system. Kind of like Florida, which is, if it's diverted in large amounts, it's not uniformed anymore, right? And so I think they're going to have to design some levers that could adjust this on appeal and hold harmless funding for district, which may mean increased funding for districts to make it balanced or something. And then we really have in Ohio this lack of, under the current system that one trial judge voted nay on, but we still don't know, is it, do we have to increase accountability and oversight for all the schools that get direct institutional support? Right? So does that mean private schools and charter schools and bachelor religious schools, homes, everyone that gets vouchers, do we need increased levels of accountability that right now most other voucher programs don't? And so I've covered this before, but the rules are not the same, right? And so maybe Ohio is going to be a good bellwether case. I'm going like, look, if you're going to do a voucher program in our state, you're going to have to meet with all the same laws, all the same rules, and it's going to have to be uniform and clear and thorough and efficient across all common schools. That would be interesting. At least that would make it a little bit more equitable, right? All right. But once again, I don't know yet. This is all like grabbing a cloud right now until the state Supreme Court cases start handling it. And by the way, there is a chance that if a bunch of Supreme Courts, a bunch of individual states say different things, that the federal government could end up taking it up if it gets involved in a thing called interstate commerce, which I'm not going to get into. But it basically means the federal court can come down and try to make states be equal. But once again, there is no right to education federally. I know, it's really thick, guys. Okay, let's talk about Arizona real quick. Arizona has another interesting statement. It doesn't use uniform. It doesn't use thorough and efficient. It uses an aid clause prohibiting public money in aid of private sectarian schools. So it literally has an aid clause, which is you're barred from providing aid. Now, we got to define what aid is, right? So in 2009, a case called Kane v. Horn, it struck direct voucher tuition payments as unconstitutional aid. Now, once again, we're right back to that same thing of direct tuition payments. So if the money comes from the government directly to the private school, that's considered aid. That's considered bad in the federal government and in most states. That's why Florida and other states are designing this middle person so it's not directly to it. I don't know what the effects are. It doesn't feel any different to me. The effects don't feel any, whether or not it goes to a middle person where they take a cut and then it goes to the people, feels like I'm losing my tax dollars and not even going to the babies. But we're kind of seeing this over and over again of this direct voucher tuition payments are unconstitutional. Then in 2013, I'm gonna destroy this name. Nihas versus somebody please help me with the pronunciation. Hubbenthal, Huppenthal, another Arizona case. It upheld. So I mean, it said it was cool. It's allowed to have ESAs, educational savings accounts, because funds go to parent-controlled accounts for many allowable uses. And any benefit to private schools versus a parental choice is not direct state aid because it's the parent's choice. So once again, we're seeing that if it's the parent's choice and the government's out of it, we're going to allow a lot more of these. And I think that that's what more and more of these programs, these vouchers and ESAs are done. And so it looks like if the parents are going to choose it, it's probably going to be held up. And if I'm going to make a prediction right now based off of my, 8 hours of studying on the constitutional law of these things, they're probably going to be held up if it's the parent's choice, right? Because we're Americans and we like American, as America, we like to have choices. We like to not be told to, just drink Coke. We like choices: Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, whatever, water. So we don't like to be forced to do things. And so if it's a parent's choice, probably going to pass in a lot of these states. So what's legal now in Arizona is that ESAs have a very strong track record, but direct tuition vouchers do not. Academically doesn't matter. No, we're going to have school choice there. Right. So I'm going to talk about my home state of Tennessee right now, even though I'm a Floridian by youth. I live in Tennessee now. And so there's a clause in Tennessee Constitution, and it's a home rule amendment, which means not little, but different cities can have kind of different rules and general education vouchers, which is kind of crazy, right? But in 2022, Metro Government of Nashville versus the Department of Education. So the city of Nashville, they have a metro government, but it's a city, is versus the Department of Education. And so they sued because they wanted to get clarified. And what happened in that case is it upheld ESA pilot against a home rule challenge. Okay, now this is really, really thick. Okay, what does this mean? Is it in this state, they have this thing called home rule. It doesn't really matter because it's not a barrier. That statewide vouchers' durability will hinge on program details, not these home rule little clunky adjustments on state constitution. So look, this is really thick, but the basic gist is state constitutions differ, and every state constitutions differ, but if the state legislature wants vouchers and ESA programs, they're probably going to find a way to make it work. And so just be aware of that. And that's kind of what's going to happen in Tennessee. I do want to cover Texas, and then I'm going to kind of summarize, okay? So Texas has two articles, that deal with this. Article 1, Section 7, which is no money appropriated for the benefit of any sectarian aid, this is a no aid type restriction. We talked about that earlier. And Article 7, Section 1, which are the legislators' duties to provide efficient systems of free public schools. This is the first time we've heard efficient systems of public schools. It doesn't say uniform, though. It just says efficient. Okay. So there was a new law this year in 2025, SB 2 if you want to look it up. And it creates educational savings accounts. Now, I think it's $10,000 per student, but they also have a kicker for children in need. Now, Texas is the only state that I'm aware of that their educational savings accounts, their voucher programs, grants, whatever, have a kicker for students that need. Now, Texas legislators admitting that children in need more funding to take care of them so they become awesome adults, right? And I think it's like $15,000 or $30,000. Anyway, it's more than the $10K, right? So the issue is $10,000 per student is more than some schools in the state get per student. Oh my gosh. All right. So I find that that's going to be challenged. That's kind of interesting, right? But they do recognize that children in need more money. And so they're willing to pay for the schools that receive the vouchers, education savings account money to get more money for those kids. So maybe that will encourage them to take more. But isn't that admitting also that they don't have to take those children? Right? I mean, little Brian Stevens may not have gotten taken to one because I had a speech impediment, I had other problems and things like that. Maybe they just wouldn't take little Brian Stevens, but maybe if they got more money, they would. So it is saying that schools that accept the ESRs and the voucher programs, it's all about the money. It's all about the money. Okay, so I think that gets rid of some of their arguments, right? Okay, so back to Texas. So this law is going to be, slated to launch in 2026-27. The governor signed it in May, and legal challenges, of course, are anticipated. Now, there's likely a lot of risk, but it's more defensible if it's a parent-directed ESAs, not directed state tuition checks to religious schools, which is in alignment with all, Zellman and Spinoza and Carson, all these other laws we've been talking about endlessly here on these latest two podcasts, right? And so if it's not directly from the state, but it goes from the parent to the school, more likely under most state constitutions and the federal law to be allowed, right? The potential vulnerabilities to this new ESA program is that if challengers prove the ESAs function as direct subsidies to religious schools or materially erode the Constitution's requirement for an efficient public system, courts could scrutinize this and limit it or reject it. So once again, we use words like thorough, uniform, common, and now we've got this new phrase in Texas, which is efficient, right? And we don't have a definition, as far as I can find, about what efficient public education means. I don't know what that means, but these are the things we got to walk away and be really paying attention to. So here's our cross-state takeaways. All right. Remember, federal law, it has to be neutral, which means it can go to anything as long as it's not based in any kind of discriminatory protected class like race or religion, right? And if it's parents-directed aid, it can be used for religious schools. That's okay. States can exclude religious options because they can have their own state constitutions to deal with that if that's their choice or already written into their laws, right? In some cases, uniformity is going to be really important. That means if you get a voucher program, that private school that gets a voucher program has to be uniformed or as efficient. It can't be better or worse than the public schools, right? So it's got to be uniform and adequate across all boundaries. And we don't really know what all these words mean. I mean, we know what the words mean, but we don't know how the courts are going to interpret them. And if it's seen as undercutting public schools, which it is, they do, for Pete's sakes, man. We talked about this endlessly, but of course it undercuts public education. It's just to be proven to a court, right? Is that if it's not adequate and uniform, it could be a problem. Now, look in your state constitution, South Carolina, Arizona, for instance, that says no aid and no direct benefit. So it cannot aid private schools. And if it does, it's going to be disfavored. Now, I don't know if it goes to the parent and directly to the parent and then to the school, doesn't that still aid them? Or I guess the argument is no, it's aiding the parent, and the parent can do whatever they want to with it. That's kind of the argument, I guess. And the last thing for us to kind of think about as we finally walk away from this rather thick subject is that implementation timing matters. Tennessee is 25-26, so this school year. Texas is going to be 26-27 primarily. And the laws can be on the books while litigation plays out. So even if you think it's unconstitutional, they start doing it, they're going to keep doing it until a lawsuit makes a determination. And just be aware of this. Every year it keeps doing it, the courts are going to be less and less likely to kick it. They're going to find a justification for allowing it or not allowing it. So are voucher programs constitutional? And you're going to hate this phrase, but it depends, right? And it seems to me that right now it hedges on if it goes to the parents and the parents make the decision. But I think that's how most of the programs are being written. So I think, look, I'd encourage you to challenge them. I'd encourage you to put up the good fight. And if it gets the traditional public schools the rights to be more flexible, more agile in the way that they educate the children, I think that would be a great benefit. So if it makes education actually uniformed and it puts you on a competitive stance, not a pro football team going against a little league team, which is, the laws really hamper and hold back public schools right now, but that's not their fault. That's the law's fault. So we need to change the laws. And maybe by challenging some of these voucher programs, we can get more fair laws out there for the public schools too. So look, I covered a lot. I hope that it's at least waking you up to start paying attention to all these things. I'm sure you already are paying attention to these things if you listen to this entire podcast. So I appreciate you. And if you have other issues you want me to cover, if you have any thoughts about things you'd like broken down or want somebody to come in to provide it more simply, or if you can provide it more simply, get on the podcast. We'd love to have you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.